All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest Urban Living webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about a really interesting topic, all-inclusive energy in PBSA and co-living. Uh, is it still a given? Is it the way forward? Are there alternatives? We're going to have a deep dive into that with our panel shortly. My name's George Sell. I'm the editor of Urban Living News. We are an online B2B platform for the living and flex workspace sectors. And today's webinar is brought to you in partnership with Amber. Amber is an energy management solutions provider for UK businesses wanting to increase profitability and reduce carbon emissions. And we've got Tim and Andrew from Amber on the webinar with us today, so we'll find out some more about them shortly. In the meantime, you can see contact details and links to find out more about those guys in the chat. So today's webinar is going to last an hour. We're going to have around about 45 minutes of Q&A with our panelists. We'd like you guys in the audience to get involved, so you can submit questions using the chat or the Q&A function in Zoom. We'll either answer them there and then if it's the topic we're on, or we'll save a bit of time at the end of the hour. Everybody who has registered for the webinar will receive a link in a few days to a recording of the session. And we'd love it if you take a couple of minutes at the end just to fill out a survey. Give us a better idea of the sort of topics that you want us to do future webinars on. So we have got a very knowledgeable and, if I may say, slightly boisterous panel with us today. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in turn. And we'll start with you, Tim. Welcome to you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, George. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Yep, I'm Tim Stephen. I'm a property person in a utilities cloak. It's kind of a weird thing. There aren't many of us about. So I'm an asset manager by trade and by training RSCS and all that kind of stuff. But moved over to the utilities industry to try and encourage the property industry to take this part of the business seriously. Obviously, the price has done that in the last couple of years, but you know, Amber are in a unique position to try and help property people because we speak property language. So that's enough from me for the time being.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Andrew, good morning to you.
Morning. Sorry, just finding the mute button. Yeah, great to meet everyone. I'm Andrew, or AJ. I've been at Amber for 5 years. I actually have a retail background originally, but head up our consulting and advisory. And I suppose between Tim and I, it's that how do you how do you make strategic decisions that make sense operationally? And so that's the lens I come at energy from. There's lots of acronyms and abbreviations and geopolitics and fun stuff to debate, but ultimately it comes down to can you pay for what you need, and who should pay and who's choosing about what that energy comes from. So that's what I hope to bring today, and hopefully we'll have some great questions as well.
Thanks, Andrew. And we definitely won't be sure on acronyms. That's a given. Next to Kirstie. Good morning to you.
Morning, thank you. So I'm Kirstie. I'm one of the co-founders of Investment Students. We're an accreditation that gives operators of student accommodation the ability to evidence and measure the experience that's being offered within their buildings. We operate in UK, Europe, Ireland, and recently Australia. And we measure the satisfaction of over 216,000 students every year. So I'm hoping to bring a bit of the student voice to the discussions today.
Thank you, Kirstie. Deenie, good morning to you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Deenie Lee. I'm the co-founder of the Property Marketing Strategists. We are a strategic marketing consultancy with a real focus on product and making sure people understand what the customer wants so they can market that effectively. We also, as part of the Property Marketing Strategists, run a youth forum where we do kind of pulse surveys with students 2 or 3 times a year, where really kind of ask questions around living, sustainability, cost of living. So really kind of understand what's challenging students right now, and we share that back out to the sector. I'm also co-host of Housed, the Shared Living podcast.
With a flashy new website, I see this week.
With a flashy new website. Yes, please go check it out.
Thanks, Deenie. And last but not least, Rocco, good morning to you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Rocco. I'm Business Development Director for VervLife. We are a third-party co-living and build-to-rent operator, operating and advising across the UK. We have sites across from advising from anywhere in the deepest, darkest Cornwall all the way up to Scotland. Currently under management, we've got just over 5,500 units, which is split between co-living and build-to-rent.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Well, as you can see, a terrific panel. If you would like to continue the conversation with them after the webinar, you can see their LinkedIn profile links in the chat. So if you're not already connected, then drop them a line. Okay, let's jump straight in with our first acronym. This whole issue about all-inclusive energy really is a question of NOI, amongst other things. So, Rocco, let me start with you. Energy prices have been pretty volatile the last few years. Doesn't look like that's going to level off anytime soon. Is the traditional all-inclusive model becoming a bit of a liability when it comes to NOI?
Yeah, it's an area that we are starting to sort of hone in a little bit more. The costs are rising, which is obviously affecting the NOI. So we're starting to look at different ways of how we can try and drive that down. The because the president has been set already from previous schemes, it's sort of difficult to try and detach that, especially from a co-living side. We're working with partners to try and see bringing in technology to try and lower those energy bills. We're looking at various different heating solutions as an example. Heating controls are quite key at the moment, so we're working with the likes of Utopia on that, and also advising on clients on how best to structure those moving forward from a very early stage. Investors are quite concerned about how much of a percentage it is affecting the NOI. There have been conversations lately where investors are starting to explore whether we do start to put this charge back onto the residents more so. Now, like I said, it's because, especially in co-living is seen as an affordable product compared to build to rent and the PRS side. It's quite difficult to detach yourself from that mantra. So it's actually more working to see, collectively how we can lower those energy bills by bringing in how we're building these assets and the energy ratings off the back of that, which then will link back to the energy prices being lower, but also using the technology side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Rocco. Tim, what's your take on the NOI piece?
Yeah, I think it's it's an interesting scenario whereby when energy was kind of 12 per kilowatt hour forever, for 10 or 15 years, the kind of spotlight was never really shone on energy. It was accepted that this was part of the budget. And to Rocco's point, I think the increase, and frankly, the further increases that are coming through the bills, April 26 is going to be another little chunk on the non-commodity part of the bill. These increases are continually coming through the bills to a point where it's becoming such a large proportion of the budget that viability, it really does affect viability. In most operational budgets, as we know, there are two heads of costs that dominate the cost base: staff, people, and utilities. They make up the bulk of the cost. And at the moment, from where in our operation of around 120,000 student beds, and we are seeing more conversations and concern around the fact that chunk is kind of not addressed or not thought at. It's kind of accepted by the market rather than really kind of worked like any other operational costs would do. So I think that if we want and I know Deenie will come in on this one in a minute, but if we want mid-market product, if we want viable accommodation for the long term for students who aren't necessarily flush with cash, we're going to have to kind of address this NOI issue, because at the moment nothing's going to be built. especially at the lower rates. And I think co-live is exactly the same. It's smaller, yes, but the NOI effect, essentially will be the same. It'll be viable in some areas, but it'll become unviable in other areas pretty quickly. And so I think the kind of understanding of the impact of such a large proportion of your ops budget on NOI is only going to get more essential as viability pressure continues to increase.
Yeah. Andrew, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I might, at risk of kind of jumping ahead, the light bulb moment for me. So we've been looking at this for kind of 5 years or so about how do you kind of manage costs better, and you go down all sorts of different rabbit holes. You look at central plant and how it's designed and that kind of thing. The bit that shone a light for me is where people like Utopia have come in, or where we've been managing buildings with sub-meters and that kind of granularity. Is this isn't really about getting students to use less, although that is an upside of it. The big thing when we looked at the data was the spread between the highest using and the lowest using students is massive. Yeah. If they were all broadly using the same thing, then the whole thing's about, well, how do you get everyone to reduce by 10%? And actually the kind of all-inclusive thing means that the low users are subsidizing the high users. And that's kind of, for me, why we've been kind of looking at different ways of doing this. But sorry, Deenie, I'm probably taking us off.
I'm tempted to say that's a microcosm of the human race in general, but I won't get too philosophical. Deenie, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I guess the frustration is that we're in this place because we've built a product for a certain time and a place. As Tim said, when bills weren't an issue, they weren't expensive. It seemed great to do it all inclusive. From a student perspective, of course, it's brilliant that it's all inclusive. And, we asked this question several times in our youth forum about all inclusive bills. And yes, they do want all inclusive bills because it's easy, it's convenient, it's what they know. We aren't actually telling them what the negatives of that are, or what the benefits of not having all inclusive bills are. And I think part of the problem we've got in the sector is we're still thinking like we were 20 years ago. And actually the world is a completely different place. The students are in a completely different place. Their affordability matrix is in a totally different place. And therefore, I think, as Tim said, we need to look at the fabric of what we're putting into these buildings and how we can reduce all this cost and do things differently. I think we need to package up these products differently now because the time and place that we had before has gone and we're in a new world.
Yeah. Thanks, Deenie. Kirstie, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I guess, again, I think we're probably spoiler alerting some of the other questions that will come later on more specifically. But the thing about all inclusivity isn't necessarily, or isn't about a tariff. Like, students don't think in those terms. When they talk about inclusivity, when we look at our data, it's more about no stress and no surprises. And so I agree around different models, but I would just always take it back to the simplicity of what all inclusivity does. And when we talk about affordability, it's being able to have that predictable piece around, I know what I'm going to be spending. And so there is just that fear around the management of metering systems or caps or behavioural changes that will have a significant impact on student sentiment and student wallet. And I think it really comes down to building the right product, but how do you communicate that as well? Because there's such a simplicity in the all inclusivity. And like I say, that the biggest drivers of dissatisfaction are the mismanagement of expectations. And so there has to be something around that. Capped all inclusivity isn't a product, right? It's contradictory in its nature. And I think that's the bit that we need to be really careful about.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirstie. Rocco, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on that, and I think it's highlighting a couple of points. Obviously, looking at it from a code side of it, but again, there's the link there with the PBSA, and it's look, this very much comes from there has been and from my view, there has been a lack of delivery. So like we've said, that we're looking at things from years ago, and I think where the delivery has held up has sort of affected that. So we're sort of still building things where we were, most probably 5+ years ago. So technology has sort of moved forward for such a long period of time. So we do have a bit of a gap here now. which is linked to other factors, which is outside of that. So, you know, we need to acknowledge that, and that's where, you know, and I know we're going to go into later on, but looking at the retrofitting side of it and see, you know, where we've got assets already stabilised, how can we try and get those down and get those energies bills a little bit more on a level. Now, you know, we could turn around and say there's as an example, we put fair usage within our contracts. Now, everyone on this call, for example, on this webinar, will look at that. What is fair usage? Because for me, it would be very different to Tim's, as an example. So, you know, there's also just a bit of an educational piece of just trying to understand where that sits. And then from a procurement point of view, it's trying to get the best deal, because, you know, like we said, at the end of the day, all these assets are owned by institutional funds, investors, etc. So, you know, we need to ensure that we are, from an NOI perspective, for the original point, you know, we need to try and drive that down.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're on that, Rocco, are the investors in the buildings that you're managing, are they starting to look at this and thinking, well, this is the way we've done it for so long, but there are better ways now? You know, are they looking for more transparency in the sort of energy use piece?
Yeah, I think it's more just because it's such, and Tim touched on it. It's such a chunk of the NOI. You know, it's hard to look past it. If it was a lower amount, arguably they'll be like, okay, that's the cost. It is what it is. And I think we've gone for such a long period of time in doing that. Actually, now it's being looked at and saying, well, how can we better design these schemes in order to drive that down? So yeah, absolutely, investors are starting to look at that, trying to scrutinise that. From us as an operator, we're going to market and speaking to the likes of Tim, Amber, and others to sort of see how we can work collaboratively to try and bring that down. You know, because again, it sort of links back to the delivery side of it. If the NOI is a non-starter, then these guys aren't going to invest in it and not going to build on it. And it's using the technology. You know, tech has come such a long way from where some of these buildings have been operational even for the last 3 years. So, you know, we need to start to plug that in. And we're starting to see that now, where more and more companies are coming with solutions of trying to bring these costs down. Unfortunately, with the energy bills are the energy bills in that sort of sense. You know, we can try and drive them down as much as we can, but I think we need to pivot a little bit on how we then put that into the buildings. Is it the sort of putting more onus and costs on the residents? You know, co-living is an affordable product. So for me, my personal views was probably you're going to be at a disadvantage to the market. But you know, there's other ways that we can do that.
Yeah, Tim, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah. I just wrote down on my pad here. The NOI kind of conversation is kind of dominated by valuers and valuers' reactions to it. And I think part of the communication piece, as Kirstie says, is not just about communication of students. It's about getting valuers comfortable that they understand that the impact of fixing your annual line in your ops budget is pretty huge, because at the moment, in an all risks yield, the major I would argue almost like the only risk is utilities, because you literally don't know from year to year whether you're going to have a cold cohort or a hot cohort, and your to Andrew's point, the range of your consumption is not consistent, because it can't be, because you've got different people in the building every year. Slightly different with co-live, but I think the average lease length in co-live, is not necessarily annual, but there is a higher turnover in co-live as well. So you're not going to get that consistency of usage by that you might get in build to rent, where we're looking, the kind of leases are becoming slightly longer as the market matures. So the values, we've got a job to do for the valuers to really challenge them to say, okay, well, if we are able to fix our NOI, our NOI, the risk in our NOI, what are the basis points? What basis points are we going to get back? If there is a valuation shift on it, what happens is the investors say, well, okay, well, there's a valuation, so I can see the benefit of this. Oh, and then all the other benefits that we're going to discuss around environmental, around energy reporting and granular data, they kind of come as a consequence of a kind of, strict financial, point about NOI. You can start from the net zero end and go backwards towards the NOI, because frankly it's all on the same line, and it kind of works both ways. So there's definitely a strong valuation conversation to have. And maybe the next one we do, George, we get a valuer on to kind of discuss in length about what goes into an all risk yield, and how the market would adopt a fixing of a budget.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Tim. Deenie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that is that from the youth forums that we've done where we've asked students about kind of all-inclusive bills, we've had students clearly say to us that I use as much energy as I want because I'm paying for it. And I think that control of those bills is that it's not, you've got no control, and they're paying a lot of money, so therefore they're going to use as much energy as they want because they've got no transparency, to Kirstie's point, on either way of kind of what they're spending on bills and what they're not spending on bills. So therefore that ability to control that bill, and I know there is technology out there and there's ways to do that, but you've got that mindset shift, is that I've paid for this energy, so I'm going to use it as much as I can because it's all included.
That thing, like, I paid for it, so I want agency over it. Like, that's the thing. Like,
the same. I know we say this anecdote. I say this anecdote all the time. Everybody on this webinar turns the shower on in a hotel slightly earlier than they turn the shower on at their own home. It's a fact. I paid for it. I can use as much as I want, because it's all in cost.
I steal all the shampoo and soap, right?
Well, it's the same. But it's the same thing, isn't it? It's like it's basically the same thing. I think that human nature piece is kind of that's where we see in the pilots and stuff. We see the immediate savings come over without sending any bills out. As soon as people understand that they could be charged, the behaviour changes.
The hotel shower can be the difference between ironing your shirt and not. So I mean, it has got secondary use there. Anyway, Andrew, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'm in a risk of taking us off the topic. I think within this space, we can get a bit binary about it's either all inclusive or it's build. And I think there's lots of other models that we can copy from other sectors. And I remember, so I was kind of old enough to have been at Waitrose when they were first looking at online shopping, and we did loads of focus groups around would people pay for a delivery slot, and all the focus groups were just like mind blown, because at the time everyone was shooting for market share, so everyone was giving free 1 hour delivery slots. So we did all this testing about, what if you had a slightly longer slot and then you got confirmed in the day, because we're trying to do route planning, and what if you booked further in advance, and could we show you that a van was in your area and you might click on that? And it was absolutely like, no, we won't do it, because Ocado will give us a 1 hour slot for free tomorrow. So everything else from that is worse. Yeah. But I think in this space, if you look at how different industries have evolved and adapted, you look at the gym membership market. Yeah, you can have an all-inclusive, go whenever you want, or you can have an off-peak one, and people know what that looks like and they choose it. In the mobile phone space, you can have as much data as you want and take it wherever you want in the world, but you're going to pay for that if you're happy to.
Right? It's clear. Yeah, it's really clear and really easy to understand.
And it's measured and all of those kind of things. And I think that's the piece. It's about working out, what does that language mean? Because you're right, Kirstie, it is clear, but does everyone know what 10 gigabytes actually? We know what it is, but we don't know what it means.
What it equals.
Is that watching Match of the Day for an hour, or is that being on Facebook once a day? I don't know. Or is that how much Spotify is 10? And some of that kind of comes through. And people care about what they can do with energy, not energy. Only geeks like us care about kilowatt hours. Like, most people want to know if their room's going to be warm or not.
Speak for yourself, Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew, I'm going to stick with you because this next question is slightly geeky. I think you could say, well, I was doing a bit of research for this session. Um, the updates to the GRESB this year include moving, and I quote, landlord-controlled tenant energy into scopes 1 and 2. Is that going to have a significant effect on reporting for investors and fund managers, do you think?
Yeah. Um, so what does that mean? So previously, landlords could argue it was scope 3. It was in their supply. It was a downstream use of their carbon emissions, and they weren't in direct control because of all the things. And I think the fact that landlords, it was always a grey area because landlords were making the choices ultimately about how that was managed. They were choosing upfront how it was, and then got out of having to report for it. So I think that will shift for those funds that care about keeping their GRES score moving forwards, and that being a part of the valuation. That will make a shift, and it could be a reasonably significant shift in the numbers to get people to have a look at it. There will be some who just shrug and go, well, our GRES scores got a bit worse, but we can explain why because they changed the rules. But I think there'll be some that engage in saying, well, how do we do something about that? How do we make a difference? It's connected but similar. I remember there was a developer who decided this wasn't student accommodation, I don't think, but decided to put individual fiscal meters in so all the residents could control their own energy, on the basis that it meant that they didn't have to report the carbon because they could say, no, that's residents. What was interesting was that there was a German pension fund looking to invest in that property, and they said, we need a plan as to how you're going to reduce energy consumption by residents by 30%. And the developer said, well, I can't. These guys can use whatever they want. And the pension fund said, well, we're not going to invest. Now, maybe that's an extreme example, but it is this piece of, this is a joint relationship about how efficient a building is and those kind of things. And I think done well, we can drive towards more efficient buildings that people choose how they use energy.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Tim, touching on that point a bit, if the market does shift towards more of a pay for what you use model as standard, where does that leave buildings that are structurally incapable of sub-metering, value wise and in terms of attractiveness to purchasers?
I mean, it's a good question, and there's always outliers that the cost benefit analysis doesn't quite work. But I think rather than focus on the small amount of the market that and I think it's a very, very small amount of the market. It actually, if you add up the sum of what has been said in the last 25 minutes, the kind of upside of putting the metering in, which isn't actually that expensive, and we've had conversations with pension funds that when we link it to net zero, when we link it to something green, they're like, oh no, we got a separate stream of funding for that. Oh no, that okay, no, actually no, we can draw down different because, and actually it's a different thing, and that there are pots of money around to increase energy efficiency in the market in general terms. Sub-metering becomes something that allows a granularity of data and a positive effect on not just the green stuff, but on the ability to I don't want to call it a stick, but the ability to hold the stick. So people go, oh, I could be charged. So, well, okay, well, I'm going to change my behaviour, and then trade on the fairness. It's kind of, it might sound a bit soft, but at the moment, the user who's environmentally, the user that doesn't want to use a lot of energy for whatever reason, they don't want to use a lot of energy because they think it's the right thing to do, is paying for the energy if somebody doesn't give a monkeys and opens the window when it's boiling. That is inherently unfair, and it's unfair to the kind of to a sector where ostensibly the people don't have as much money. They're kind of transitioning to be adults and they don't have a load of money. So, you know, I think there are lots of things on that kind of value chain that justify kind of, you know, at least investigating what the sub-metering might cost. A lot of people just say, "Oh, we're not going to investigate it." Well, hang on. Oh, well, you know, let's see. You know, let's see what the payback is.
Yeah.
You know, actually, if you can calculate a percentage decrease, the payback might. Yeah, we've had paybacks of 18 months. Okay, you've got to have the cash. You know, cash is hard. You've got to have the cash to do it. But you're in a situation where if it's an 18-month payback on anything else in business, you're taking 18-month payback all day long. But there does seem to be a stigma around sub-metering and the technicalities and how hard it is. That means that and would never take a 5-year payback on a sub-metering system. It's like, really? So, you know, again, I think a lot of that's education. A lot of that is like, you know, really understanding the kind of upside benefits of getting more granular data. Surprise, surprise, everybody, buildings aren't built equally. You know, there are cold rooms and there are hot rooms, and there are things that you can do within your buildings to certain rooms or areas in the buildings that would have a big effect on the energy consumption in the building. But without the granularity of data, you would never know. And the specification in the O&Ms can say what the specification in the O&M says. But what's the reality? You know, who's testing the reality of the building 5 years later or 2 years later or on PC compared to what the specification has told you it's going to produce? There's not enough of that. There's not enough of that diligence done in the market to really understand where this energy is going. At 12p a kilowatt hour, it didn't matter. At 25p a kilowatt hour, at what was the highest? What was it highest in the energy crisis? £1 a kilowatt hour. It really makes a blinking massive difference. I'm going to swear there. It makes a big difference. To
this is a family show, Tim.
Well, yeah, no, but it does make a huge difference. And you know, geopolitical. You know, everybody laughs when energy people start talking about geopolitics, but geopolitics drives the market. That is kind of a fact. So I think more and more people, and hopefully people on this webinar, have all these thoughts in their minds already, and you know, it hopefully will allow you to solidify some of those thoughts and those thought processes, in order to kind of drive the process forward for whatever end your investor or you or your what you want. You know, it's not what we want. It's to how to enable your goals of NOI or sustainability moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Kirstie, I think you got your hand up first.
Yeah, I'm crudely picking up on something you said there around like the people who are using the least amount of energy for whatever are paying for the people using the most. I think we have to be kind of a little bit careful around that, because what do you then do about social spaces and how that works, and going, well, actually, I haven't used a study room or I haven't gone to an event, so I want to look at how that pay for use model looks, right? Like that, I think that there's just a careful way that we look at and define those things. I think visibility is one of those things, but how does that work then around, like say, around social spaces? Going, how do you measure that impact? And you're buying into something, right? And that all inclusivity is buying into something. Then if you're going to segment that out, that becomes a really tricky thing. And I'm crudely, I know what you're saying. No. I know it was an example, but like I think you have to be careful.
Well, I agree, and I think that I would be relatively militant on this. I think you should meter the, you should meter the building to within an inch of his life. Mm-hmm. We should know where every kilowatt hour is going. And then when you know where every kilowatt hour is going, you can then appropriately apportion the cost to the right people. And I'm not saying that you can then transfer all the cost to the students. That's not it. No. But once you understand what's being used in the rooms and then what's being used what's being used outside the rooms, you can make a much better decision on on what your rent is. You can make we talk about dynamic pricing in the market. All the time.
We talk about it. We don't do it, but that's another webinar, right? So let's not talk about that.
But dynamic pricing is like, well, okay, if you've got data, you can dynamically price because you understand what the costs are.
Tim, you've just pulled back from 2 F-bombs in 2 minutes. Well done. That was good knowing that.
They weren't. It wasn't F. I don't think it was as severe as F. It was
You were going to meter the something out of the building.
It was a meter the but it was it was mid level swearing.
Deenie, I'm coming to you next.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the short-termism around the 5 years payback. Like, these buildings are going to be there for a lot longer than 5 years. So overall, it's always going to be beneficial putting in this technology. But the problem we've had for such a long time is that it's been short-term investment with short-term return on that investment. So therefore, that investment isn't then viable for that investor. But I think the positive thing is that we are seeing more pension funds coming into the sector. And I think that's a good thing, because then we can go back to looking at these long term. It's never not right for the building, it's just not right for the investor.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to refer to with the separate streams of money. That there are definitely separate. There's a separate kind of attitude towards things that make the buildings more sustainable in the long term. And a lot of investors haven't asked the funds. They don't know whether that is applicable to them until they ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's very few people in the sector that can tell you what proportion of rent is on bills, because no one's ever answered the question to me. And that's a problem. Like, operators should understand that actually my base rent is this and the cost for the utilities is this, and that makes up, but they can't tell me that. And that's not, there's a transparency issue there from themselves in understanding actually what's going on in their building.
I'll see if I can find it before the webinar ends, but there was a post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago from LifeX, a co-living operator, and they put a pie chart up, which kind of
broke it down.
What you're paying, and how much energy constitutes what you're paying. I'll see if I can get my colleague who's running the show in the background to find it and put it in there.
And I think that's a start. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we don't really explain what all-inclusive bills are. And if we want to go another way, we've got a lot of work to do to communicate what that shift is. But even as a base level, if you started talking about all-inclusive and saying, actually, this chunk of it is to allow for your bills, people then have an understanding. So if you do want to switch, actually, you're already halfway down that education route of understanding what it is. And that's the problem, is that we're not. I totally agree with Kirstie. We need to be transparent about this, and we need to be fair about it, and we need to communicate so that everyone understands their expectations. But at the moment, the market's never had to talk about it, because it's always been a build it and they will come. Now we're not in that world anymore, and we really need to start communicating things in the right place, in the right way.
Yeah. Rocco, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Again, coming in from a co-living perspective, obviously, from our side, it's and something that Tim just highlighted there. You don't want to put the costs, all the energy costs and everything onto the residents, whether you're a student or a co-living resident member, and because from a co-living side of it, and as us as operators, we're sort of incentivized to be able to put on events, and the whole product is about the amenities and everything else. So there's a huge amount of energy that's going to be put into that. So we also have to recognize and acknowledge the fact that quite a lot of the energy bills are going to be more suited to that size of things, and sort of put the percentage is going to go on that. And I think there has to be a bit of a and like we've just said, I think there needs to be a bit of an understanding about what the actual utility bills per room would be compared to what you're actually pumping into the amenity spaces, etc. Because from a co-living perspective, and the same as PBSA, to attract residents and students to the building is going to be what you're designing on the amenity side and everything else. So we're always sort of pushing for the next big thing, and sort of ensuring that what is the latest trend to be able to capture that market. Now co-living sector at the moment, I think we're in a position where there is a lack of supply compared to the demand, and from an occupancy rate at the moment, co-living is quite popular. Our average tenancies, just as an example, is 17 months. So it's actually quite longer than what people would have anticipated when this product was first introduced. So people are starting to get a little bit more accustomed to that. So I think we just need to be a little bit mindful of that. Now again, where co-living sits compared to the other classes, to PRS and build to rent, it's always going to be the sort of entry cheaper option. So, you know, as an example, and what you just touched on, Deenie, there is when we price up the schemes and we put the rental numbers together for investors, we actually look at the build to rent side of things and make an assumption of what the bills would be based on those units, and then we factor that in and say, right, okay, well, in co-living, you have to, because you're all inclusive, we're going to always have a bit of a discount compared to build to rent. On the face of it, it looks a little bit more expensive because build to rent is just pure rent and no utility bills, and ours is all inclusive. But then when you factor that in, it's always going to be a cheaper option. So we try and educate those investors as much as we can and say, look, these are our assumptions. But again, like Tim said, you know, you won't really know until the building's built and you've been operating it for the last year before you actually get a bit of you've got a sense on the pulse of what those energy bills are. So, you know, there is a constant education, and just we need to be just a little bit more on it. Now, again, like I said, I don't feel the right solution is to put it back on the residents, because co-living is that product, and it's an affordable product, if you'd like to call property affordable nowadays, but that's by the by. But you know, it's a solution to a house in need. So we also have to recognise that.
Rocco, is there a kind of middle ground for co-living, a sort of capped inclusive model where you've got some sort of protection in there then against unexpected price spikes, both for the resident and for the investor to a degree? Is that an option?
Well, you know, energy prices, if they go up, and obviously with the renters' right coming into it, and we won't go down that rabbit hole, you'll be limited of, you know, how many, your rents can only go up once a year, and it's linked with RPI.
That will be another
So
rabbit hole, by the way, folks.
yeah, we'll touch on that one another day. So for us, it's actually more trying to, you know, we as operators, we have to recognise that and say, right, okay, costs have gone up, so therefore we have to, you know, manage that with the rents. But yeah, at the same time, we do put those clauses in the contract that cap. Again, it's the fair usage policy that we put in, that you can't exceed a certain amount. If you're going to leave the shower on every day whilst you're out, you know, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you're going to get pinged, because there's enough to justify saying, well, look, hold on, you're doing that. Now, for newer buildings, you're going to be able to track those things happening. There's plenty of technology being put out there. With the older buildings, you're going to have to retrofit that, and that's where potentially then you can start putting the onus back a little bit on the residents. And when the residents, if you put a little bit more onus on that and say, actually, you know what, this is where we sort of need to sort of limit the usage, then that, for residents, they start to appreciate that. Again, you have to look at the individuals who are going to be sitting there, who are going to be living there, the demographic. Are they going to be in the rooms 24/7? Most probably not. You know, in a co-living world, what you want to do is try and get them out into the community and trying to be part of a community within the building. So it's meeting new people, etc. So they actually want to utilize the amenity spaces. That's why that's so important. But yeah, I think having it's the clauses within the contracts to ensure that, you know, and that's upheld. But also with that, from protecting investors' point of view, is, you know, if energy bills and everything is going up, something's got to give. You can't just keep the rents at the same, and it's just the way the world is. You know, everything has got to bump up, and so everything has got to be slightly aligned.
Yeah, thanks, Rocco.
Yeah.
Tim, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, just very quickly to your point, Rocco. That's kind of why. That's kind of why I think the metering of non-lived-in spaces is so essential. I mean, I think if a product is based on creating a community, but you don't know what that creating that community costs in terms of, you know, 40 to 60% of the NOI of that, you know, of the 40 to 60% of the cost of those creating that community, how can you make an evaluation of whether the creation of that community is working? But because without the data, you're just relying on occupancy, and as we know, I think most PBSA landlords this year would say we've been lovely in the market, we haven't done anything different, but occupancy is just fallen through the floor. It wasn't our fault, Gov. We didn't do anything. We didn't do anything different. We didn't. And without that granularity of data around, the anecdote is the cinema room. If you had a little kind of, a ticker on how many films that were watched in the cinema room, and it turns out with the energy metering, with the cleaning, it turns out the cinema room is costing you, 250 quid a film for the amount of use it gets. I think you're making a serious decision about whether the cinema room is worth it. But at the moment, you can't, because you don't know. do you know what I mean? It's just trying to get to that kind of that basis where you can make those decisions.
I think there is an element just there on that, and I'm not plugging ourselves into it, but can't help myself. That's why from our point of view, we want to be involved a lot earlier in the design process of these schemes. Especially build to rent, and we do a lot of DEFCON work within that, but also from a coding side of it, we want to be involved as early as possible, stage one, because we can at least try and drive that and say, look, guys, it is like you said, Tim, the old cinema room scenario. How many times is it actually being used? Not that many. It's hardly being used. It's a waste of space. You can use that in a more efficient way. Actually, it's just it's expensive on the energy bill. So that's why we like to be involved as early as possible, because then we can say, well, look, actually, design the product to the demographic and also what the people want, but also be a little bit smart of what you need and don't need, because that will have an instrumental, it will have an impact on the bills further down the line.
Or Kirstie said, don't build a cinema room, or if you do, promote I'm going to use that word again, promote it to really, really loads, so your cost to serve, so your cost per film gets down to a sensible level. Again, without the data, you just can't make those decisions. And I think interestingly, we're doing more work in kind of senior living and residential care, and they tend to be slightly more outward looking. So outward looking to the community to come in and use their facilities, and talking to these guys, they're again, the valuation of that. It's like, guys, you're setting your gym membership based on a local market without any reference to the costs of running it. The people like Utopia and all those guys, we can get this granularity through, and we can do the analysis in order to be way more progressive and smarter with our viability. And it all comes down to viability in the end, doesn't it? Because we've got to move forward. We've got to continue to move forward. People still need houses. People still need student accommodation. We are still going to need to build all these things, but at the moment we can't, because it's not viable. So we need to work in this area to really make it viable. And I think all the tools are there. This is the frustrating thing. As an asset manager looking back into the industry, all the tools are there. We're a bit, as to Deenie's point earlier on, we're slightly stuck in the mud. And we kind of need to try and dive out of it and down the water slide.
We've got some good questions in from the audience, so I just want to do a couple more off our agenda before we come to those. And let's talk a little bit about behaviour and fair use trials. Kirstie, I want to come to you. And what have we learned from fair use trials so far about how to nudge people's behaviour, how to encourage them to be a bit more responsible without coming across too sort of overbearing and heavy-handed?
Oh no, I'm half joking. Our data set doesn't contain explicit use of language, fair use language, so I'm not going to pretend I can talk about kind of some of those outcomes. We do have a sharp subset of student comments that talk about energy saving controls. They'll talk about timers and locked heaters and settings imposed by staff, and that's the bit that's where it becomes a mismatch of expectations. So Water doesn't get very hot. My room's cold. It's not hot on the hottest setting. And we look back pre this webinar, we look back at over 100,000 free text comments over the last couple of years. And the data is really loud on comfort. So comfort, hot water disproportionately dominate energy mentions. It's like 59%. That's when people talk about it, it's when something's gone wrong. And there's a direct correlation between that and the reduced livelihood of the book and the value for money scores, which are kind of foundational elements of reputation, right? Students react strongly to outcomes. So comfort and reliability, they react strongly to friction when it doesn't work, it didn't work as expected. And so it's like everything is great, but the hot water didn't work. So it suggests that for me, that like that heavy-handed enforcement, and I'm talking about heavy-handed, it risks denting otherwise strong experience. I think students are really forgiving of older and less shy facilities when the experience is good. And that experience is about making friends, sense of community, all those things, but it's having the basic needs met. And those basic needs are heat, hot water, and Wi-Fi. And I'm not talking about Wi-Fi because we'll be here all day. But students are more tolerant of those limits when the core service works. So if a nudge interferes with warmth or comfort, it disproportionately damages satisfaction. And if we are moving towards nudging and caps and behavioural inferences, that margin for error is a lot smaller, that tolerance is a lot smaller. And so what the data suggests is nudging will only work if the underlying service is reliable. And look, if the sector's moving in that direction, which I really don't, I think metering everywhere, fantastic. Understanding it, fair use policy is fantastic. Pay as you go won't work. Students buy into that all-inclusivity because of the predictability of it, and because there's then more forgiveness when some of these things don't work. But if it is moving in that direction, the service has to be rock solid, or people will vote with their feet. Like that's it.
Thanks, Kirstie. On that point, Deenie, if fair use does become more prevalent and your competitors are still offering all-inclusive while you offer fair use, how do you go into the marketing battle during the sort of booking and lease up cycle on a level playing field? What can you do to help yourself in that respect?
This is education and messaging, is that if you're doing fair use, you're doing it for a reason, and there's benefits to the customer for that reason, and you need to market and develop that messaging and be clear about that. I think I agree with Kirstie that students do want all-inclusivity. They want that predictability. It's really helpful. But I also have a personal, I guess, view that actually there's an ethics here in that actually we need to teach people about energy usage and the control of it, and it's in your control. You know, we've done focus groups with a co-living client, and we had one person there who had lived in a hotel. She'd gone straight out of school into a hotel job, had been given free accommodation, was then on the rental market for the first time. And she was at a complete loss she was getting herself financially into a complete problem because she didn't understand the process of what renting is, what your bills were, and having enough money to do that. And I think as part of that first step into independent living, we do have a duty to educate people, and actually this is real life. At the end of the day, when you leave here, you are going to have to go and pay bills, and you're going to have control of that bills. And we do have, from our youth forum, we do know that they want more control over energy. When we asked them, 69% said they want control over their energy. Yeah, they probably don't want to pay for it. Of course they don't. Who does? If you get free energy, you get free energy. But
they are paying for it. It's not free. It's not free.
Well, it's not free. You're right. Yeah.
This is one of the big problems. It's not free. Like, it is in there. You are paying for it. And my question to the panel, and to the market is, have we asked the participants in this market what premium they're willing to pay to be all inclusive? Because if you said to not be all inclusive, you could save 250 quid a year on your rent. How many people would say, I quite like that idea?
How many people would then go to a HMO, because that's the HMO model, right? Like, the HMO model is a non-inclusive, all-inclusive model. It's I'm paying for my room, and then everything else is what I use. That's fair use in reality. Like, that's that model.
Yeah. I think we should have given extra time to this webinar because we've still got loads of audience questions and everyone wants to jump in.
Yeah, everyone's got
Let's
hands up as well.
yeah, everyone's got their hands up. Let's go to the audience questions though. There is one there from Catherine Austin, which is by far the longest question we've ever had. And
Well done,
it's
Catherine.
going to take too long to even read out on here. But Tim, can I suggest you cut and paste that and maybe take that conversation offline with Catherine?
Yeah.
Otherwise that's going to take
Well,
too long. Well, we've got some others here. Chris Martin asks, do you envisage a scenario where providers look at energy consumption data to offer rebooking incentives for those residents that are more conscious about their usage levels? Who wants to take that one?
Um,
Go, Kirstie,
well,
go.
The only thing I would say about it is uh, our sophistication as a sector to be able to do some of that stuff. Like it's hard enough getting rebooking out as it is and being able to book the same room for some people out there. So I think that aspirationally that's really not. I wonder how that. I'm taking away the student voice bit about that, by the way. I'm just looking at the practicalities of how would that work, and again, people talk to each other, and there's sometimes upset like you paid more than I did just for the same room, and so I think that creates a little bit of discontent, perhaps.
Yeah, you could argue that they have earned the discount, but yeah, that's another conversation. Okay, another question here from Brian Okinansky. This is a slightly sinister one. Is there a way to know if students use communal areas in the way Amazon Fresh knows what you're checking out without scanning them? That sort of takes surveillance to another level. Is the tech out there to do that? Well, clearly it is in Amazon stores, but is it in the living sector yet, do we think?
I don't think so. I think there are movement sensors are available, and you know that there so there is an element, there's an element of that, and I think there's a challenge to the industry, the living sector industry, not just student or co-live, about being very transparent about the fact that that tech is that data is being collected. So, but I'm not sure whether they're pumping that into an algorithm to serve you ads on the thing to make sure that I'm not sure we're that sophisticated at the moment.
I'm not sure.
But
I'm not sure people would want to be that scrutinized either. I think yeah, it's like moral consideration there. Another question here from Piers to Sword. This is specifically a co-living one. Is there any tech which can be used to monitor energy use and split the cost between residents? Rocco, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think from that side of it, look, we've got smart bidding and monitoring platforms, which you could use to monitor the energy use and sort of split those costs accordingly between the residents. It is going to be based on the metering side of it and how that metering is, whether that's through your app, whether it's more your traditional metering of some sort. We need to put that in. Now with coding, you're not going to be necessarily. We don't put meters at the moment. We don't put meters within the miles of the rooms because it's all inclusive. So it's then looking at that. So there are platforms and apps and tech that we can definitely look at and utilize. Um, Again, and I emphasize the word energy when it comes down to these all-inclusive bills because from a co-living side of it, separate to PBSA, you're on the hook for council tax as well. So, that's the other sort of attraction to co-living. But just to highlight that point. But yeah, there are some platforms that we're sort of looking at the moment to see if that's a viable option. Again, for me, because of the product, I would be less inclined to sort of add an additional cost to those residents as part of the rent. Actually, what we want to be able to do is monitor the fair usage and see where the spikes are, because then we can sort of trigger that clause into it to be able to say, actually, you know what, you either get a not warning, but we have a conversation say that your usage is higher than the average across the asset. Therefore, we need to sort of factor that in and maybe look at your usage being charged an additional amount because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, thanks, Rocco. We've overrun already, and we could go on a lot longer, but it's been a great discussion. Just a couple of quick things to follow up on. Brian has added to his question earlier about the Amazon Fresh analogy. They could have apps on their phones, but this activity monitoring would certainly need to be transparently communicated for research purposes to understand resident use patterns. It's been a really great discussion. Go on then, Tim.
Just quick. I think Brian's right, and I think like I said in the comment, like data should be a two-way thing. It's a two-way street, all this stuff, and I think the concerns that I've heard from Kirstie and Deenie are not actually concerns against kind of the principle, but more about the way it's communicated, more about the kind of if we do it in a clandestine manner, then of course it's not right. But actually, if we do it, if the challenge is if you do it in a fully transparent manner, then are we being my last thought for the day is, are we being slightly patronising to the market by not giving them the choice?
My only thing I would say is, yes, transparency if we're going to do it. I would also say it's a dangerous thing to head towards at the moment, given the volatility of the market as it stands. We think about renters' rights reform coming in, student recruitment numbers. If we think about BTR coming into the student sector particularly, I think if you look and if you're putting a model together that appears worse to a student, I think that's a risk to the PBSA market. So I don't think it's necessarily just about transparency. I think it's about the overall proposition of it, and one of the benefits and one of the main reasons that students pick PBSA around that is around the no worries, the no stress, the no bills bit. And so I think that's more my point. Sorry, I know.
Finish, but just want to say it comes down to cost though, ultimately, because students want affordability. If it's cheaper and it is convenient, it does need to be convenient, and it's not that horrible thing that we had to do at university where you had to go through the bills and work out who had made what phone calls, because that's what we had to do back then because we had a phone line.
With the highlights pen.
Exactly.
I love it.
If it's convenient and it's easy and it's cheaper, then there's a product there. If you're going to do it and make it more expensive, then of course not, but I think that's the benefit, is you're in control of what you're spending, and we need to be in control of what we're spending. So that's the thing. It's affordability, isn't it? If it makes it affordable and it means you're not paying for stuff that you're not using, you're paying someone else to use it, then that's fair and that's right. And it means people can still go off to university if it's affordable. And that's the key thing.
Thank you, Deenie. That's a good note to finish it on. Thanks, everyone. We're just going to show a quick few slides before we wrap up. We'll also leave the session open for a couple of minutes because there's loads of interesting stuff in the chat that you might want to take notes from, copy and paste, including a link to that LinkedIn post from LifeX that I mentioned, which is the pie chart, which is the breakdown of what their all-inclusive rents cover. It's quite interesting. So the next webinar in this series is on March the 6th, and it's looking at what's next for living sector investment. And if you'd like to join that one, you can find the link to register in the chat. If you'd like to work with us at Urban Living News on our digital or in real life events, do drop my colleague Sam a line. You can see his details on the screen and also in the chat. Thanks again to Amber for sponsoring the session today. You can carry on the conversation with Tim afterwards. You can see his contact details there, and I think they're also in the chat too. And thank you all for watching. Thanks to all our fantastic panelists, Kirstie, Rocco, Tim, Andrew and Deenie. Really great discussion. Could have gone on for a lot longer, I think, but it is Friday, so I'm just going to wish you all now a great weekend and hopefully see you all on another webinar soon. Thanks very much. See you soon, guys.
Thank you.
At IHM, we believe in the power of connection. We exist to inspire, to inform, and to unite decision makers who are shaping the future of hospitality and real estate. Our why is simple. We believe this industry thrives when people and ideas come together. And we're here to make that happen. So how do we do it? We publish 4 leading multimedia brands, each a trusted voice in its sector. We blend intelligent content, curated events, and a strong community into everything we do. Making it easy, accessible, and genuinely useful. From online engagement to face-to-face connection, we are known for being insightful, collaborative, and refreshingly human. We host world-class events, panel discussions, podcasts, award ceremonies, and webinars. Designed to spark ideas, drive conversation, and create impact. With over 62,000 monthly web visitors, 55,000 email subscribers, and 69,000 social media connections. Our reach is deep and our community is active. We're partnered with the biggest names in hospitality, and we'd love to connect with you. So whether you're looking to grow your visibility, meet the right people, or understand where the market's heading, read, watch, listen, and me. Do it all with IHM.